Yeah. Sure, it's easy to sit out there and be high and mighty about it and say that I should have done the right thing. But you weren't there. We carry out the missions that exist in the shadows between legal and illegal. We prevent catastrophic situations, and if we do our job right, and we always do, nobody is any the wiser afterwards.
You fighter jocks go out and abuse my planes, and then I put them right. Been a long time since I saw you. Good to know you're back on the team.
So I heard there was some hotshot new flyer joining us. Arrow Bowman. The Colonel told me about you. I'm Kelsa Townsend. Call sign Sonnet.
I've been called self-centered, egotistical. Show me a pilot who isn't, and I'll show you a corpse.
Perform with skill and you will find yourself amply rewarded by DDI. Fail, and I won't have to fire you. The enemy will take care of that for me.
Crenshaw and the Joint Chiefs have tasked me with an operation that will only succeed if I have the best pilots under my command. HAWX needs you. I need you, son.
There are only two types of aircraft. Fighters and targets.
I used to play RPGs as a kid. Role-playing games, mostly D&D, Dungeons and Dragons. You see, my brother and my dad both pounded me relentlessly in traditional board games like chess. I'd spend days looking for ways to beat them, read up on strategies, study for weaknesses. I'd have everything worked out well in advance of setting up a board and telling my dad or Curtis I was ready for a game. The game. The one that would show them I could compete. And then, again. Knight takes queen. Checkmate. It was frustrating. That is the thing about chess. An amateur will never beat a master. The game is rigged in favor of those who study it, understand it, live it. Try as I might, my brain just wasn't wired that way. I wasn't calculating enough. Then, one day, my dad sits me, gives me a D&D rule book. I was immediately hooked. Here, you could make the rules, have your own adventures. Imagination and creativity were rewarded. There were no committing strategies to memory because the game changed depending on the quest and the dungeon master. But, more than anything, the game gave me the chance to be the one thing I wanted to be more than anything else. A hero. Now, while I liked the fantasy of the game, what really appealed to me was the notion of chance. This one thing that a game like chess doesn't tolerate. But in D&D, the game is about making chance work for you, or defending yourself against it. It is strategic and unpredictable, and what you learn in one session you take with you to the next. As you get better, so does your character, and so do the games. It evolves, and chance becomes less and less of a factor as you learn to master it. You see, this was a game I understood. This was about reacting to events, not planning for them. For me, something clicked. I learned to become a hero. I was hooked. Now, the same concepts apply in the air. When you're dueling another pilot, and the stakes are his life or yours, you create a strategy. But so many variables mean that every aerial encounter is different. What type of aircraft is he flying? What are the closing speeds? Are you almost bingo fuel, meaning that your jet will perform differently than when you left the ground 3 hours ago? Pilots call it situational awareness. Being in the moment, expecting that the roll of dice might not go your way, and being able to, on a dime, create a solution that sends your opponent for a ride on his ejection seat while his plane fireballs around him. Plan for the best, but expect the worst, and you'll always be right. This is the way I live, and this is the way I stay alive. There are moments when hidden truths reveal themselves suddenly and brutally, and with a lot of other lies and deceptions begin to tumble like a set of dominoes, one after the other. In that moment when I discovered that the elite project, Hawk Squadron, was commanded by my father, it told me everything I ever needed to know about him. It told me a lot about Ringo, too, though I was going to learn a lot more. Rainmaker would have been just fine with me going head-to-head with my own father and his pilots. Of course, like most epiphanies, It felt like I should have known it all along. There were clues, and I just never followed them. And I was so busy looking inward after Curtis died that I couldn't see 3 inches in front of my own nose. Well, if you know this much, you know my story, but let me tell you it my way. No cutting the angles, no spin that someone else might give it. It doesn't make my story more accurate, but it at least makes it pure to what I believe. You know, they say it's not just in the facts, it's in the telling. So here you are. I was the second son. My brother Curtis was always a star. The funny thing is, I didn't resent that, even if everybody seems to think that I did. You see, truth be told, I idolized him. Maybe if I'd had some different life where I didn't know what it was to always be the one standing in the shadows outside of the spotlight, I would have resented it. But I've only lived my life. And Curtis was a fact of that life. See, while Curtis was still alive, I was more or less known as the introverted brother. And I kept to myself. I did well in school, I was okay in sports. I didn't have to be great because he already was. That all changed when he died. I didn't feel as much like I wanted to be a star as much as I just wanted to fill the void left by my brother. It was like the sun had been extinguished and someone had to step in and make sure the next day would come. So, I jumped into the fray, best as I could. But when my mother died, it was like my father and I were 2 different stars floating around in the darkness. Gravity is the biggest enemy of a pilot. It can attract, and in the right circumstances, it can repel. So, there you have it. I was flying for the USAF out of Langley. That's where I got the name Arrow. Play on my last name, obviously, and because the brass thought I was straight Arrow, which I wasn't. You see, the joke was on them. So, there you go. I'd been at Langley for about 3 years of my 6-year tour when the word came about Scorch dying in some X-plane. Then Mom was gone. It was like the wind was knocked out of me. And try as I might, I couldn't catch my breath. But there was more still. It wasn't long after that, Dagger pulled strings to keep me out of a cockpit. The old man had lived up to his call sign, a dagger in my back. Whether he was trying to hurt me or protect me, or keep some promise he made to Mom, or maybe just get me to quit so his reputation would survive intact, I couldn't say. But whatever the motive, it had the wrong effect. For a while, it was as if I were floating alone in an empty universe. Well, an almost empty one. My father's old wingman, Rainmaker. He heard about the falling out between me and Dad, and he reached out and said I could fly for him. That should tell you something about how little I knew my father. He's a hard guy to know. He's old school John Wayne style. Strong and reserved. Not silent, mind you, but he didn't say things that didn't have a purpose for being said. And sometimes he didn't say things when he should have. I retired my commission. Personal hardship. I think Dagger pulled some strings to get that to go through. And I became a mercenary. I went from being a pilot for the USAF to being a gun for hire. Someone else's fight became mine. All you had to do was pay Rainmaker to fight it, and I was your man. Now, when I think of that period of my life, I don't think of Rainmaker. I think of Twister. He was something I'd never seen before. An aristocrat. Smooth as a gravy sandwich. Twister was always looking for the big score in every sense of the word. The guy carried himself like he knew there was never anything bad that could happen to him, regardless of what he did. I learned to manage chance. He just didn't care. He knew he was going to win regardless of what his opponents tried against him. Arrogance doesn't begin to cover it, because he didn't believe this. He knew it, and he had the skills to back it up. For a time I wanted to be Twister, but pretty quickly I figured out it wasn't in my range. First of all, I'm not that suave. And second, whatever I am, I'm real. I feel pain. I give my word. I keep it. My dad called it honor, and there was a time when I didn't understand exactly what it meant. But when you've been betrayed, you know what honor means. Because when something is put to the test, that is when it reveals itself. Its true self. And what Twister lacked, like most of Rainmaker's pilots, was honor. One mission, Twister and I were out after an HVK. That is a high-value kill. He was some oil-rich prince who was connected to everything bad, you name it. Anyway, he was attending a conference with a famous arms dealer to discuss a business opportunity which involved toppling the dictator of a failed South African state with the idea of strip mining their diamond fields, leasing their oil fields, getting out of the country inside 5 years, doubling their fortune. Did you get all that? Now, I'm not sure why he needed more, but he did. Night mission, we went in to neutralize the target. We had false flagged our jets to look like another country's air force and had planted stories about their stepping up their war on piracy. It was supposed to look like an accident, that they'd hit their ship. I didn't much like any of this, but the ends justify the means sometimes. This was one of those times. So, another country would be blamed for our mission. They would, of course, deny it, and of course nobody would believe them. But the prince and the gun runner would be dead, and the world wouldn't miss them anyway. We'd get paid. DDI would get a stake in the failed state and a percentage for future services, and everybody would go away. Except it all went bad. We couldn't get clean intel on the ship. When we got there, some of those ships were friendlies. I refused to drop the bombs, but that didn't stop Twister. He overrode my fire control and did it himself. Bombed every ship below us, just to be sure. Now, he knew he was hitting some of our own. Well, some of the naval forces we'd been hired to protect, but Twister said DDI wouldn't be blamed, and the mission would be completed with the targets eliminated. Said that war was ugly and this was the price of doing business. Well, not for me. Not then, not ever. That was the problem. For Rainmaker and Twister, war was business. Well, it was over for me then with DDI. The question was, how was I going to get out of there alive? I realized that had I died, nobody would have asked any questions. Rainmaker would have had another pilot inside the hour, and Twister, he would have had a new drinking buddy. Yeah, it's not like the USAF. There's no brotherhood. There is no family. There is only money, and there isn't much of that for anybody but Rainmaker. I remember watching a show about cowboys one time. A quote stuck with me. I never saw a gunslinger who died rich. And that's what a lot of pilots think of themselves as. Modern-day gunslingers. So you can see where my mind was at. You see, those thoughts had a special resonance for me. It got me thinking that you rebuild your soul one brick at a time, or you get it crushed by the whole load when you aren't expecting it. It was Ringo who pulled me back in. He was smart about it. We met in battle, and then he started his campaign. It was precise. A text here, a ping there. Ringo said that there was a place for me at Project HAWX, and, well, that was pretty much that. Wanting to get out and getting out are two different things. In the process of leaving, I both misunderstood DDI's intentions and capabilities. When Twister tried to hit me, last traces of the hazy blur of my life cleared. I'm not sure why it became necessary to snag Chaser, but it was. I almost died for that bird. I don't know much about bird emotions or intellect, but he was probably as disgusted with Twister as I was. Whatever might have happened later, I will always be indebted to Ringo. He brought me over. I'd heard about HAWX, probably danced with him a couple of times in the sky, but I didn't know much. I was stunned to see him. I'll never forget it. It was stiff and tentative. Then a flutter came across his face. It was a micro-expression, but when a micro-expression is attached to one of those two faces you see the moment your eyes open the world, you can read it. It was relief and joy and pride and love all in one. We talked like commander to recruit, pilot to pilot, man to man. Everything but father and son that day. That would come later. I took the job. They agreed, without my asking, to expunge all the black on my record that might have been left there by my association with DDI. Clarity can turn into murk and into opacity with a few good keystrokes. Black turns to gray, then to nothing. It was a couple of days, and then I met Sonnet. See, I had this sense that maybe I'd met her before. Maybe seen her around some DDI after-mission 12-ounce curl session. Of course, I knew that couldn't be true. And of course, it would be even more stupid of me to ask. It would be a huge violation of OPSEC, not to mention the fact it would pretty well slam a door that seems to be open right now. Or, at least, unlocked. Ringo tried to go through that door. It was locked for him. I think once Ringo figured it out, that knowledge sprung whatever was holding his rationality together. Knocked it wide open. I'm not sure when he mentally checked out, and whether this was all about Sonnet, but for whatever reason, Ringo did the one thing a man should never do. He turned his back on a friend. He sold me out to the enemy, and then he shot me down, and not like Sonnet had. Ringo blasted me from the sky, something I'm sure he could have never done. But he was different. His cold calculation was now tainted with a manic edge that made him better than me that night. Or maybe I couldn't bring myself to finish him. I could argue it either way, but he won, fair and square. I knew there was going to be a rematch, and I knew the outcome would be different. But we never got that chance. It was Chaser who led me to Sonnet. I think I'm in love with her, though I'm not really sure. I've never been in love before. And I'm fully aware that she's too good for me. Of course, I don't show it. I've learned enough cockiness to hide it. It's part of the skill set of being a pilot. Nobody wants to fly with a guy who doesn't believe in himself. You'd better exude attitude and sweat confidence, or the only thing you'll be flying is a desk. Sonnet and I started going on hunting missions with Chaser. She took to that bird right off. It was like an organic extension of your UAVs, and don't get me started on that. A plane has a man in it. A pilot has a plane around him or her. End of discussion. Period. So my sense is that they need a new name for these vehicles and their controllers. Anyway, you can see how this might have led to some friction between Sonnet and me, and not the kind I was hoping for. Still, I loved being with Sonnet when we'd take Chaser out and let him do his stuff. Pure flying. Instinctually intercepting targets mid-air. Power diving in a maneuver called a stoop at 250 miles an hour. The peregrine falcon is the fastest animal on Earth, and Chaser and his kind have been fighter pilots for thousands of years, long before man ever strapped on a set of wings and took to the air. This was after my father had gone missing, presumed dead, and there were moments when I thought maybe Sonnet was going to tell me something important, like there was something bottled up inside her, something she was almost ready to release. Just me and her and Chaser. Anyway, it didn't happen. And I didn't know how strong she was until I learned what she hid from me. But you know some of that by now, or you and I wouldn't be having this conversation. Now, Manny, I'm not sure what he's up to. One day he's my uncle, one day he's my father, one day he's my priest, one day he's my psychiatrist, and another day he's my guru. He got into my head the other day. He was talking about Boyd's OODA loops. It's an algorithm you run in your brain constantly. Observe, orient, decide, act. You run it through your brain like a mantra, like a hypnotic chord riff. He said I should bring it into my life. Now, I think I do this instinctually, but giving it a name, well, I read once that when you name a thing, you possess it, take ownership of it. So maybe Manny was onto something. Then he told me about another strategist, a guy named Warden. His whole thing is about effects-based combat. It doesn't matter how many planes you put up or how much stuff you destroy. All that matters is the effect you have. I've been meditating on that. Manny seems to be amused by Sonnet and me. Yeah, he's onto us. If there's an us to be onto. Still, I can see something in his eyes, like he's warning me. He said once that a man isn't anything until he's had his heart broken. Well, if that's the criteria, I'm a man many times over, but sometimes I wonder. One of those mysteries, I guess. Which brings me to another. A man you'd know by reputation, no doubt. Major Zeal. He's got something planned for me, I think. I've been running into him more times than I'd like, and usually for a pilot, that would mean a long ride on the nylon or worse. So, this has me both concerned and a little intrigued. I don't know how this all connects back to my father or Rainmaker or maybe even my past. But I'm determined to find out. Yeah, I'm not sure when I realized that things were changing in ways we could have never foreseen. I mean, who gets a thrill killing an inanimate target? But that's what we're facing more and more each day. Aerial warfare is being reimagined, reinvented, and retooled. And guys like me, well, let's just say that the days of the Knights of the Air are over. There's no jousting, no glory. Used to be a pilot and his machine. Now it's becoming technician and his machine. Soon, it's just gonna be the machine. And when that happens, what am I gonna do with my life? As it happens, I was born, more or less, with, I don't know, limited social skills. It's always been this way. I'm not sure what it is. I mean, some people are born cool. Part of nature's way, I guess. So I had to make myself cool. Earn and study and sweat my way into a line of work where walking with a swagger is a way of life. I'm a fighter pilot. Everyone knows that Ringo is one of the best in the world. That's me, by the way. No, that's not conceited. It's just an inarguable truth. And if I wasn't, Dagger wouldn't have chosen me to be a part of Project HAWX. People of goodwill and good faith could disagree over my personality, but when you look at the stats, there's no argument. There's me, there's everyone else, and I'm kind of cool with that. However, even I have to admit that there are some intangibles that Arrow, Dagger's son, has over me. Not better, just different. Effective, but unpredictable. That might be his one big advantage if I'd go so far as to concede one, which, at this point, I am not. Lesser minds refer to his kind of piloting as maneuvering outside the flight envelope. To me, it's potentially dangerous. But still, I respect him enough to lure him back into the fold at HAWX. And strange as this might sound, given what I've just said, I consider Arrow to be a friend. One of my only, truth be told. Another pilot I've encountered recently calls himself Major Zeal. I don't know if he's really a major, and if so, for which Air Force, but he fights his own battles on his own terms. He may be the only one of us who deserves to survive all this, but what I wouldn't give to splash him in a fur ball. I guess that would be more pride than rage, but anyway. Everyone sees me as calm and in control. Calculating, even. Shows how little they know. A man can only take so much. Learned that from my father. I was born in Norcross, Georgia. Not a lot of Japanese Americans in the area, but my father worked for one of the bigger Japanese electronic companies that had a headquarters in Atlanta. He was in sales. He could talk to anybody about anything. Knew exactly how to listen and then mimic his customers' way of speaking without their even realizing what he was doing or offending them at all. Needless to say, he worked hard. So he expected things at home to be the way he wanted. And what he wanted was quiet. I can't remember a single time he ever raised his voice to me or my mom or my older sister Miko, but there was this one night I woke up to this horrible sound. I thought it was a couple cats howling. I went to my window and looked out, and by the moonlight, I thought I saw my father at the edge of the woods in our backyard. And he was screaming at the top of his lungs, yelling at the trees. His whole body was shaking. And he turned around and straightened himself out and headed back into the house. I quickly slid back into the darkness of my room, and he never knew I was there. I don't know, maybe he did. Because the next day at breakfast, he gave me something. Now, my father is not a superstitious man, but he carried this ancient coin on his keychain as his lucky charm, if you will. It came from his grandfather, who claimed it was from thousands of years ago. The only identifiable thing on the coin is an apple. My father said this coin has given members of our family good luck in moments of greatest crisis for generations. And he took it off his keychain and handed it to me. I don't know when or where the coin was made, because no numismatist I've found can date or place it, but all agree that it is truly ancient. Now, in college, I had the coin set in a ring, and I wear it every day. Few people know this, but this is the reason for my call sign. Everyone assumes it's from the Beatles, but I was never really a big fan. My parents like country music. No, in Japanese, apple is Ringo. Was I the apple of my father's eye, as the saying goes? He didn't say. Ever. I didn't ask. I don't think I have to. My father's actually still selling electronics, flat screens and flash drives and that kind of stuff for the same company. Still actually in the same position. He has never asked for a promotion. It wouldn't be honorable. My mother still dutifully has dinner waiting for him. Miko's living at home while she goes to med school. I call when I can, which isn't as often as I should. Wouldn't want to upset the silence. Now, when I think of a father, I can't help but think of Dagger. Dagger, like my father, is a company man. His company happens to be the Air Force. And now with HAWX, something a little harder to trace, but just as structured and even more lethal. Dagger has given the Air Force his blood, literally. So I wonder if Dagger ever goes out into the woods at night and screams into the darkness. I wouldn't mind joining him if he did. I'd say that Arrow and I do have a common bond. We both love flying. For me, the cockpit is the one place in the world where I feel utterly in control, master of my own destiny. And the culture of my parents, choosing your own destiny wasn't really an option. It was pretty much given to you when you were conceived. Now, the rest of the world is just chaotic. And when I fly, sometimes I come to some very disturbing conclusions about life. I was a philosophy minor at UCLA. Aerospace engineering was my major. Never intended to be an engineer, but I did intend to get into a cockpit, and I figured that ROTC would be the ticket. Calculated steps. Every single one I took was measured to get me where I wanted to be. Problem is, I haven't thought of a single step to take after I leave flying. I don't really want to go into commercial aviation, bus drivers with wings, as I call them. I mean, no disrespect. They have a responsibility of keeping their passengers safe, and where would the world be without them, right? But I just can't imagine that life for myself after all this. It'd be like, I don't know, learning how to walk after you spent your whole life running. Not that I have everything figured out. Far from it. I mean, for instance, no reason has yet presented itself as to why Sonnet would reject me and appear so attracted to Arrow. I mean, it simply is. I would be tempted to say it wasn't fair. I've come up with some pleasant rationalizations, but my best explanation is this. Sonnet and Arrow are very much alike when it comes to love. I don't think either of them has really ever felt it. Me? Yeah, I was in love. Once. Amy was her name. Felt pretty hard, truth be told. I was 17, and no, it wasn't lust. I've had plenty of time to reflect on that since. We even talked about marriage, what house we would live in, how many children we would have, everything. We did homework together, school projects, that sort of thing. We went out with each other's families. Our parents were making plans, just like we were. I think about it now, and I know we were young and still children trapped inside of bodies that were eager to be adults. Then one day, without warning and without a reason, Amy said, "I'm sorry." That was it. Sorry. For what? For us, for leading me on, for finding someone else, for coming to her senses, for wanting to focus on school before getting bogged down with a boyfriend, for feeling the pressure to grow up. No, I'm sorry. No calls, no emails, just nothing. Now, you would think that would make me run away from women, right? And for a time it did. I lost myself in my studies. Diligence and dedication. You are the only limiting factor in your success. But still, I thought about Amy, what I felt with her, and what I had lost, and what I want back. I think that feeling is like an addiction you never really get over. If I have a greatest fear, it's that I will die without ever finding another Amy. So maybe that's why this thing with Sonnet has my meters all pinged. Jealous, the green-eyed monster, right? Hate to admit that I feel it. It's the one weakness I will allow myself to feel. Yeah, I guess maybe I'm just tired of accepting which I can't understand, or an explanation for I'm sorry. It just isn't cutting it. So, I guess I can confess this. I followed them one weekend, Sonnet and Arrow. They took Chaser up to the mountains. I watched them. My heart pounded, my stomach just tore at me. But I had to know. Now, anybody who understands human emotions knows that jealousy often turns to rage, right? And there's nothing more pathetic than irrational rage. But focused rage, that is something entirely different. That can be the difference between life and death for a fighter pilot. So I decided to focus mine on Arrow.
The name's Manuel Gutierrez, Manny to my friends. Since I don't know you, we'll leave it at Staff Sergeant for now. I don't fly. I keep 'em flying. That's my art. Not to say that I've never done it, flying, just not now. Well, not as much. No, my job is to keep the planes in the air. Some of them need several hours on the ground for every one in the air. It's a dying art. And without patting myself too hard on my own back, I'm one of the best. That's why I'm at HAWX. But I suspect that you already knew that part. Sometimes when I'm here in the hangar alone, I feel like it's haunted. This place was built a long time ago. A lot of pilots have gone in and out of here. For some, this was the last place their feet ever touched the ground. They disappeared somewhere out there. But I know that their spirits did what every spirit does. It flies home. When I was a boy, we used to celebrate the Day of the Dead, El Día de los Muertos, All Souls Day. Candy and fresh tamales and remembrance of death all rolled into one. So I got used to the idea of living with ghosts, not fearing them. Feeling them around me, not superstition, something else. Maybe belief in what I can't see, like honor or righteousness. I can't touch them, but they're real. And so too are the spirits of those pilots. And for most of them, this is home. That's just the way it is. A ghost squadron. I think they look out for the men and women still flying. Pilots like Cole, Arrow when he flies. I've seen him before in other incarnations. Family is all born flyers. His father Dagger when he was a younger man. I was then too. And Arrow's brother Scorch, Curtis to his mother. Before he went off for the last flight and joined the Ghost Squadron. No question about it, Curtis was the golden boy. Numero uno, without a doubt. Always showed me respect, even when a lot of new pilots give the ground jockeys grief. Not him. I respected that right from Jump Street. It was like working with his father all over again. I'll tell you though, if you ask my opinion, and believe me, nobody does. Nobody except the old man himself. Cole is everything Curtis ever was. Not that I'd ever tell him that. It's different, though. Curtis was born with it. Cole earned it. In some ways, you gotta respect that more. Respect. When I was a kid, that's all I wanted. My family was on the street, and I had to fight my way into it. I gotta say, I did some things I'd rather not discuss. If I had to justify it, streets of El Paso, Texas don't forgive, and when I was a young vato, I didn't either. My specialty was stealing cars. Learned real fast. I realized I was kind of an idiot savant when it came to anything with an engine. Figured it out. If you could run it, I could run away with it. Any kind of vehicle. Back then, alarms weren't something we worried about. Carburetors and Detroit muscle. Now everything is electronic this and fuel injection that. Not sure it's any better. Different and the same. Still need to ignite fuel and harness the power of that ignition. Jet engine is just another expression of the same idea. Anyway, all that trouble I got into, it taught me my way around the garage. By the time I was 16, I was a mechanic. My mother used to say that before you call yourself something, you had to be paid to do it. Like I said, I was a mechanic. Some cars we'd keep for ourselves, hop and boot and drop those rides, then spend the weekend cruising for chicas. A car doesn't change the equation all that much. But tell that to a bunch of hotheads looking to impress girls. Good luck if you get anywhere. Most cars we chop apart and sell. And that's why we're talking now. See, I got busted. Me and the whole crew. Some went to jail, some got parole, and me? I got a choice. Judge said they could use guys with my skills in the military. Mechanical skills. Said they had lots of machinery I could work on. That judge said my future could go two ways. With blood on my hands or with grease. I think I made the right choice. Got to see a lot of the world courtesy of the American taxpayer. Name it, and I've probably been stationed there. Same goes for aircraft. Name it, I've torn it apart and rebuilt it. More times than I can count. Gives me an interesting perspective, like war. Can't really say I've seen it from the sidelines. When they fly in those planes, I'm there with them. The jets don't work without me. War doesn't either. I actually met Rainmaker before I met Dagger. Brilliant guy. Good people skills. When he and Dagger were flying together, they were something, let me tell you. Then they had a falling out. Don't know the details. Above my pay grade. Serious enough that they didn't fly together anymore. Serious enough that Dagger chose to keep it to himself. Before he left, Rainmaker and me got to talking about wing load and aerodynamics. He was an engineer and a pilot. He liked talking to the grease monkeys. So anyway, about 3 years on, I see that he won some government contract for his new design. It was just what we talked about. Can't say it was all mine. My ego's not that big still. When he offered me a job, I told him to buzz off. Well, I used another word, but you get the idea. I knew then and there that he was heading down a bad path. I just didn't know how bad. Now the hairs on the back of my neck tell me Rainmaker has got hooks into HAWX. Can't prove it, but I've got that instinct. Now, war has been my occupation for a long time now. It is where I first met Dagger. I was his crew chief for Grenada, Bosnia, Desert Storm. A few other adventures I can't discuss. He trusted me. Knew that he'd have the best, most prepared, cleanest tool to accomplish the job if I was the one prepping it for him. And I knew Dagger would always be coming home. He just had that air about him. Can't think of anything more appropriate saying-wise. That was made for Dagger, even if the same isn't true for his boy. It was grief that sent his life into what we call a graveyard spiral. Dagger didn't go loco. Don't misunderstand what I'm saying. But not long after the tragedy, Scorch I'm talking about. Anyway, Dagger's wife died, and I guess he just had enough grief. Life rolled him up, and then kicked him while he was down. Not that Dagger didn't grieve for his pilots. I saw him after the Malacca ambush where he lost 12 flyers in one night. But there's something different about losing your own flesh and blood. When you lose the ones you've known ever since they stood up in their cribs, La Familia. Anyway, he wanted to make sure he didn't lose Cole that way too. Stepped in like some sky god and made sure that his son wasn't going to fly. He probably shouldn't have done it, but he didn't ask for my permission or advice. Not that I would or could have given him either. Like I said, La Familia. Some mistakes just have to be made. Destiny demands it. So Dagger got himself a nemesis, el enemigo, the enemy. Not that far from amigo, friend. I think about that sometimes. True conflict requires passion, like the emotions between a father and his son. And so I thought of that when I watched Dagger, because of his pain, killed the relationship with his hijo, his boy. But it was not my place to say. But Arrow was going to fly. We all knew that. Even Dagger knew. And it wasn't for the reason a lot of people thought. Arrow could prove he was as good as Curtis. I didn't doubt that. Not for 1 minute. But I think he felt that he had to go do all the things that Curtis left undone. Like he was living the life that Curtis didn't get. Maybe my mother was wrong about that whole getting paid thing before you can call yourself something. Because I knew that Arrow was born a pilot. And nothing was going to change that. At least that's my psychological assessment. Worth about what you pay for it. Seeing as how I myself never found time for a wife and kids of my own, I guess I'm not one to judge. Now, they say I can hear what's wrong with the plane. They're wrong, of course. I see it, hear it, smell it, feel it, sense it. Sonnet is studying me. She thinks she can teach a machine to do what I do. Good luck. She's an interesting girl, Sonnet. I can see her tugged by her passion for UAVs and a growing affection for Arrow. And there's a train wreck happening there, too. Ringo's got it bad for her, and that dog ain't gonna hunt, as the gringos from my neighborhood in Texas might say. He makes her incómodo. Me too. Uncomfortable, that means. Look, there's something wrong with that homeboy. Mixed up wiring, a broken fan blade. Still, As a pilot, he's got skills. Maybe I'm seeing things I shouldn't. Wouldn't be the first time. So, Project HAWX. They're my familia now. I'm kind of the uncle, Tio Manny. The crazy uncle who keeps things going. They know I put everything I have into it. Colonel Bowman knows. It would end me if one of them ever didn't come back, and it was my fault. I look over at Dagger and I know he thinks he's got one more big one left in him. See it in his eyes. One glorious last battle of man versus machine. One last battle that he wants to win before the world we've known all our lives passes into history. Remember the Alamo. What most people forget is that we lost the battle. Well, my ancestors won it. But you get the point. It was about the honor of fighting to the last, regardless of the odds, that you must respect. Because who believes in that anymore? So you might think that when this is over, I'd want to spend my days tinkering with this and that, rebuilding engines or maybe restoring cars. When I'm done, I'm never going to pick up a wrench again. No, I'm going fishing. I'm going to stick my line in the water and never pull it out. Clear mountain stream, fresh air. Might look up occasionally and see if I can find a contrail or two. But even if all I ever catch is a cold, I'll be good.
Man is a political animal. It was written on a blackboard in college. I was the first in my family to actually sit in a university classroom, by the way. Now, these words never left the board from the first day of class to the end. The weird thing is that it was a math class. Things were erased all around it, but oddly enough, it just stayed there on the board. Man is a political animal. That's how I feel now. Aristotle was referring to politics as in elections, but I'm seeing it in the daily sense of the term. Everybody is constantly jockeying for position in any situation that you encounter. It's always about status and class and ranking and perks and privileges and access. It is always about something other than what it's supposed to be about. When I think about the people in my neighborhood growing up, that quote really started to make a lot of things very clear to me. During college, I went into ROTC. When I graduated, I was headed straight to the reserves, but then I had a change of heart and I decided to go active duty. That was 7 years ago, and I haven't had a day of regret about that decision, not one. Some might say I have a right to be bitter, that the US of A didn't play right by me. Well, thanks, but no thanks. I've seen how my people have been treated around the world, what they've done to each other. America isn't perfect, but I am a patriot through and through. That's that. And the USAF has given me opportunities that I could have never imagined. For instance, right now, I am commanding a UAV wing for Project HAWX. Now, there's more I could tell you about that, but at this moment, it is need to know only. In addition to my duties, I've also become something of an amateur falconer to Chaser, who Arrow brought with him when he came to HAWX. I'd say that Chaser was something of a gift from him, but that would imply that Chaser could actually belong to anyone, and of that I am not so sure. So right now, my mission is to develop UAV tactics to fight the wars of the future. Everybody who is anybody knows that manned craft are becoming obsolete. It's kind of sad. I look at these pilots and realize that the world they've trained for is dying. I'm not sure what replaces it, but unless those pilots want to sit in a chair and fly a drone, I doubt in 20 years there will be a place for them. Maybe less. They used to say old fighter pilots never die, they just fade away. Well, now the young ones are too. I can't say I have all that much sympathy for them. Guess my pop had something to do with that. See, my pop was a big rig driver. He worked for one of the major moving companies in Michigan. He helped people escape the hood to places unknown, and so they would pack their entire life into his trailer, and off they'd go, with my pop. He'd drive all over the continental U.S. He liked the freedom of the open road, which was a problem when you have a wife and kids. It wasn't long before he was on the road more than at home. Then not home at all, which I guess meant it's not like we were any burden to him. Yeah, Mama took up part of his paycheck for herself and for me and 2 sisters. But the funny thing is that I don't think Pop was like most men. He didn't give a tinker's cuss about the money, as my grandma used to say. Pop was different. He didn't think of only 2 things. He thought of only one, and it wasn't money. So you might say my view of men is a bit clouded. Now, I know Ringo is hot on me. I couldn't be less interested. He's a geek and a pilot double ding. Rainmaker told me to be cordial to him and string him on a little bit for harmony within the squadron, so I did it. Big deal. I didn't lie, and I didn't put myself in a position that could get me compromised. I was just friendly to a guy I work with. Well, enough about that. Oh, and one last thing, just to straighten out the details, it was Ringo who talked Dagger into recruiting Arrow Bowman into HAWX. Had to get through the old man's pride. And pride can be thicker than plate armor. Now, I might have a little to do with Ringo being so intent on getting Arrow into HAWX. Perhaps I said some things, did some things that could have been misinterpreted. There was a nice little commendation waiting for me. A commendation is a stepping stone to a promotion, which is a stepping stone to more control and authority. You see, I learned a long time ago that people are happy if they have one of 2 things. 1, control. And if they can't have that, 2, predictability. I want control. Now, you might think that they moved me to UAVs because I'm a woman. You'd be wrong. I was a cockpit jock. Flew the A-10, tank killer. That 30mm gal was the sweetest sound I ever heard. I used to sing along with it as it screamed out lead and filled the cockpit with cordite. So my call sign was obvious, Sonnet. No, the reason I went to command UAVs is because I was smart enough to see the future. My sisters in the cockpit are going to be humping the same pavement those fighter jocks will be in a few years. You have to get ahead of the curve. Job security, career security. And I'm the one who takes care of my mom and my younger sisters now. I send them a little something every month since we haven't heard anything from Pop for years. It doesn't bother me now, but when I was a kid, 15 or so, I wasn't so forgiving. I had a lot of anger and decided to turn it into something positive. I was going to give him the what for by being successful beyond anything he could ever be. That became my goal, my obsession. So I threw myself into my studies. In high school, I discovered 2 things, math and acting. Math, of course, led to the computer stuff and the engineering and the science and eventually aerodynamics. You get the picture. And the other, acting, filled some need I didn't know I had. There was nothing I liked more than inhabiting another character and, for a few hours, living their adventure. These became my tools. One right-brained, one left-brained, the analytical and the creative. Together, they would get me wherever I wanted to go. I knew that as fact. It's funny that people know me by a call sign, Sonnet. She is now the lead character in a play called My Life that I'm writing. She is the ultimate woman, the Rorschach. She's whatever men want to see in her. Maybe someday I'll see it produced, or do it myself. It does feel like my life. So many different women to so many different men. Dagger sees me as a daughter. Ringo sees me as the ideal. Cole sees me as the girl next door that never lived next to him because I was the wrong color and lacking in the financial department. I'm not sure how much of his interest is because he sees me as something exotic and how much is genuine. But I have a feeling I'm going to find out. As you might have guessed, I've never really been in love. At least I've never had that emotion I see on all the commercials. Except there is something kind of special about Arrow. Not that I'm gonna fall for him, but like I said, I am a patriot. Country first, the girl can wait. Okay, enough about that.
I run a special air wing known as Project HAWX. The name is Colonel Bowman, but everyone knows me as Dagger. Think of HAWX as an airborne SOG team, special ops in the skies. We carry out the missions that exist in the shadows between legal and illegal. We prevent catastrophic situations, and if we do our job right, and we always do, nobody is any the wiser afterwards. Nobody, that is, except the enemy, who is usually dead. Or as my mechanic Manny says, rubble don't make trouble. So, how'd I get this job? I can't name every name for obvious reasons. Let's say that just about the time I was staring at retirement and thinking about what I was going to do with the rest of my life, I was ordered to a classified location and found myself looking at the National Security Advisor and the CS-USAF, Chief of Staff, United States Air Force, as well as an old friend, David Crenshaw. There were some others as well, whose names and affiliations were never made clear. Crenshaw had been running a HAWX operation and was about to head to the Middle East. He needed someone to set up another HAWX squadron to focus on some hotspots that were starting to ignite in the Caribbean. Of course, my team ended up expanding our role beyond our initial mandate. That's the way things work. No surprise there. Well, except for the fact that I began to suspect that Rainmaker was also involved. Lieutenant Colonel Frank Rainmaker Ostreger is very familiar to me. He was my wingman a long time ago. Something bad happened on one of our missions, and I found myself in the moral dilemma of my life. I either had to turn him in or cover up. Yeah, sure it's easy to sit out there and be high and mighty about it and say that I should have done the right thing, but you weren't there. It was a liner. He hit a target he shouldn't have hit, based on a gut instinct and bad intel. See, in those days, there wasn't some computer record of everything, so you could shade the truth. The equation really was pretty simple. Lie, or a good man's career is over. I decided for the man. I'm not sure I was wrong about what I did, but I was wrong about the good part. Rainmaker is not, at the end of the day, good. In fact, I'm beginning to lean towards saying he's evil. But I didn't know that at the time. I never knew that the lie was a bond that would attach me to Rainmaker like a pair of rusted handcuffs. He had something on me. He never said it, but he communicated it. Of course, everybody was kind of tied up in the lie. We were bombing targets in a country that we technically weren't at war with, and Rainmaker had gone off the reservation. Maybe more than once. But that's a different story. After the first Gulf War, we went our own ways. I heard he was engineering new planes, building off the success of stealth technology. And I was moved over to an air wing called Checkmate, where my job was to work with the genius who had figured out how to destroy Saddam Hussein's command and control inside of about 7 minutes. It was a success that minimized a lot of American and Iraqi life. A lot of what I learned I now employ with HAWX. As Crenshaw had conceived it, HAWX was an elite surgical flying team which could deliver surgical violence to the enemy or perform a rescue of friendlies anywhere in the world inside of 24 hours. By the time I had things working the way I wanted with Project HAWX, I had it down to 8 hours, and that was for an extremely remote location. My personal life. I have had 2 sons. First, Curtis, and then Cole. Curtis was everything a father could want. Straight A's, high school All-American quarterback, you get the picture. Cole was something different, a little more like his mother, quieter, more introverted. I always loved him, but it was different. When he said he was assigned to a test flight squadron, I remember the sour pit in my stomach. It got even worse when I found out that he was flying Rainmaker's experimental craft. Then, one bad afternoon, the worst of my life, it happened out there in the desert. Another pilot said it looked like his plane had just disintegrated. Point is, Curtis, or Scorch as he was known, never came back. There were operations to find his plane and his body, or so I was told, but the accident happened in a place we weren't supposed to be flying, so there wasn't the ability or the will to do a real search and recovery. Nobody would ever tell me where it happened. Curtis was flying invisibly. I made my guesses. When nobody was looking, I conducted my own investigation and came up with nothing. I couldn't avoid that feeling, though, that people were lying to me. Maybe I could see their rusty handcuffs. I was told not to blame Rainmaker, but I did. Things went bad with my family. Cole had idolized his brother, and now he was dead. It was like he'd been possessed. He wanted to step into Cole's shoes. He started playing ball, went to the academy, and got 4-point. My wife came to me one day and asked me to promise her one thing. I would never let him fly. Not like Curtis flew. I told her yes, but I knew that I couldn't stop the USAF from doing what it wanted to do. She never found out about the lie, though. A couple of weeks later, on a rainy morning, she swerved into oncoming traffic and was killed instantly. I keep telling myself that it was an accident, even if I don't believe it. After that, I did something I'd never done before. I pulled strings. I made sure Cole wasn't going to fly anything more dangerous than a general's junket. He found out. We didn't talk for a long time. Then he was gone. I'd lost one son, and the other had slipped off the radar. I heard now and again that he was out there flying for the PMCs. It worried me sick. Kept having this dream that I was up there and pulled the trigger on him. Every time in the dream, I froze. Then when I knew where he was, I had one of my pilots, Ringo, reach out to him. Eventually, Cole, now known as Arrow, came to HAWX. It was kind of like that old Bible story about the prodigal son. I threw my arms around him and took him in. I never should have stopped him from flying, but I was trying to honor his mother. He told me he'd been working for Rainmaker, and he wasn't ready to forgive me just yet. I guess I earned that. And Rainmaker, I knew in my gut that sooner or later it would be us against him. Our old-school fighters against his techno-drones. I knew it might be the last ride for the old Cav. It would be the cleansing. All I had to do was set myself up for the fight of my life. He's smarter than I am. He's better equipped, better financed. Frankly, even I know that his aircraft are the future. But this battle is happening now, not in the future. Piloting, probably more than anything else in life, is about the now. Yeah, I think he knows more about Curtis's death than he's saying, but this isn't about revenge. It's about my country, and it's about the future. Rainmaker and guys like him are a threat to everything I hold dear. It's about saving my team, my family. That's how I think about Project HAWX, not that I'd ever let them know it. And it is about saving the one son that I still have. I'm not going to make the mistake with him that I did with his brother. The mistake that it would be me before him. Here's the rub. In order to save them, I've got to risk all their lives. Even Manny's going to have to come out of the hangar before this is all over. And when it's over, the public probably won't even know it ever happened. But then, most civilians never know how they're protected. They only know when they aren't. Thankless, this life I've chosen and the one my sons have seen fit to follow. But that's what you sign up for. Never thought at my age I'd be living an epic. But here we are.
I was going to be a pilot for life. Do my time in the military, move over to commercial, respectable, decent living. Maybe not the most exciting way to run out the clock, but it was acceptable. But things changed. For the better. I have money, power, and respect. All of them earned with blood and sweat. Especially respect, depending on how you define it. If fear is part of respect, then I've got respect. If having dictators and presidents groveling to you is respect, I've got respect. I've even got my competition begging me not to put them out of business. Respect and fear go hand in hand. This started as a problem, which became an opportunity. Happened in the first Gulf War. I was flying with Arrow Bowman, call sign Dagger, one of the USAF's elite. Dagger and I were flying over Iraq, ready for a fight, but there was nothing to attack, nothing to kill. But I came to fight, not to be a spectator. 4th week of January, 91, we get a sortie to hit a high-value target, the Mansour district. Dagger and I launch, and 20 minutes later we were flying air cap over the target, waiting for authorization to engage the target. 5 minutes later we get word we've been waved off. The target is not confirmed. Now, if we get this target now, we might just end the war right there and then. This is where my head was. I'd come to fight. Now, I'm on station. This is the moment. My moment. I made the call and engaged the target. Direct hit. As expected. I don't miss. Saw the blast, the smoke, the shrapnel, and debris go flying. It was a few hours later that we discovered that our target had moved, and there had been collateral damage, meaning the bomb had taken out some unintended personnel, maybe civilians. I went from hero to zero. Called before the CO. He informed me that there would be an investigation. Everything depended on my wingman. Your wingman is supposed to always have your 6. I expected the Dagger would have mine. I told the CO that I believed I had confirmation to engage, and that my wingman would state the same. Dagger and I had a conversation. I asked him to do what was right, to be my wingman. I said that he only needed to affirm that it was possible for me to conclude that I had the green light. Simple, direct. But Dagger didn't want to do it. I explained that I wasn't the only one who had a lot riding on this. If I was disgraced, so was our whole squadron. We'd all share the black mark. We'd bump into it for the rest of our careers. Dagger thought about it. He hated it. Then I saw the look. I'll never forget it. It was like running a movie one frame at a time. There was this moment when he realized he didn't have a choice. He wouldn't do it for me. But he would for the squadron. Dagger told the brass I could have believed I'd been cleared to engage. The brass, for their own reasons, wanted to believe it. They wanted this to go away. And so it did. After that, things were never the same with Dagger. We never discussed the matter again. It was like a stain on him. A stain on his career. He decided to try and eradicate it by becoming the White Knight. It was then I knew he was working behind my back to get me out of the Air Force. I was off combat sorties not long after. Then I was reassigned. Perhaps it was just the situation, but later when I found out what he did to Arrow, I had all the information I needed. Dagger had blackballed me. He had his reasons. Maybe he even thought what he was doing was better for me as well. If he was trying to hurt me, he did the exact opposite. Whatever the story, I don't forget, and I don't forgive. If the Air Force didn't want my skills and knowledge, I would sell it to others who did. And while I was getting out of the military, I wasn't getting out of the business of war. No, quite the opposite. I lived up to my name, Rainmaker. I made it rain for myself and for my business partners. Win-win. Started a private military contracting company called Delos Defense Incorporated, or DDI for short. Wasn't long before I was not only back, but on top. Here's how I see it. Everybody wants money, everybody wants control, and people will kill for both. Morality? That's an opiate to keep the masses down. Honor? A noble thought that gets warriors killed. I don't want or need patriots. I need professionals. Change requires chaos and courage. Not many people can handle it. My business plan is just this simple. The future isn't about countries, it's about corporations. My private company fights for the highest bidder. They give me money, I give them fireworks. Then I reinvest that money. Pretty soon, I'm the only game in town. And when that happens, the stakes go up. Meanwhile, my diplomatic team goes out and stirs up trouble. Discreet, but effective. I've started 16 wars so far, and I'm proud of it. Wars are expensive, which means my profit margins are not questioned, as long as I deliver. And that is never an issue. I've been working toward a master plan recently, one that should take the world by storm. One last problem, though. HAWX. They still have some of the best pilots around. And Dagger, the man who should have been my wingman when I needed him most, is commanding them. I shouldn't know this. The operation is blacker than black. But I didn't achieve my success without knowing my enemy. And HAWX is my enemy. I'm keeping Dagger's eye off the ball. I didn't intend it. But when things turned out the way they did with Scorch, there was an upside. A problem became an opportunity. His son's death took Dagger off his game. Grief will do that. A warrior knows you have to be dispassionate when the situation requires it. But it's not collateral damage when it's one of your own. I have some outstanding pilots flying for me now. Xavier Twister Murata is one. I've already captured all of his moves. And there's this freelancer, a pilot that calls himself Major Zeal. I'd hire him if I could, and so far no luck. Truth is, he's the only pilot who concerns me. Mainly because I can't find out who he really is. And this doesn't happen to me. Which brings us to Arrow. Cole Bowman. He had some falling out with the old man. Tragic. I could care less. But the kid's got skills and talent in the air, and every time he flies, I learn more. Gain more data that I need. In addition to being a pilot, I'm also an aerospace engineer. I've created a number of prototype aircraft that help me earn a small fortune. So I put my knowledge to good use. I can see the writing on the wall. Manned aircraft are the past, autonomous UAVs the future. So that's where I'm headed. And Arrow, though he doesn't know it, is helping me get there. My objective is to get as much as I can before I die. To that end, I can honestly say I've never loved anyone. Some might be tempted to call that being sad and lonely. I call it liberating. The moment you gain friends and family, you start losing your personal freedom, and that can never happen. Soon there will be a last battle between man and machine. Machine will win, and it will be over. When that happens, when the last of HAWX is argued into the ground, my machines will rule the skies. Control the air, control the battlefield, and I will control.
Can we speak honestly here, without a bunch of false modesty baggage? There's a reason the girls all hang around me. And that's because I'm cool. Suave. The ladies like the bad boy, but not too bad. A little rough around the edges, no? A rogue, but still one who knows how to look good. And I look good. Especially wearing a G-suit. So I get a lot of flap for flying for Rainmaker. Sounds like loser talk to me. Fact of the matter is that we all fly the same missions, take the same risks. The difference? I get paid more, lots more. You can call those other pilots patriots, but I call them chumps. Of course, that's just my opinion. But since mine is the only one that matters, I think that should carry some weight, no? Listen, I figure that this pilot thing is over in 5 years, so I've got to get while the getting's good. But I've got things figured out. I know where I'm going, and that is on to fame and fortune. This is just a step along the way. I'm living for the future, while pilots like Arrow are stuck in the past. He seems to be in some kind of competition with his brother. A real smart strategy, no? Compete with the dead? How can you win that? No. You compete with the living, and make them dead. That's aerial combat. You or him. I saw Arrow's brother Curtis at an air show when I was a nugget. He was amazing. I'm not afraid to admit. Looked like a movie star when he got out of the plane. Now I don't think anybody's got anything on me. But when I saw him, well, he had something different. But not different enough, because he's dead. And I'm definitely better looking. I don't care who you are. Sometimes you see that skull look back at you when you look in the mirror, no? You have those moments when you hear the ping and you can't find the bogey. There are those moments when you hear that weird whine in the engine and you wonder if your mechanic had his mind on his job or whether maybe he forgot to tighten some screws. So what do I want, you might ask? And I might answer. Right now, just give me another mission. Something to fight. Something to kill. I have to say that the bogies I hate most are the true believers. True believers aren't afraid of dying, but they're determined to take you with them, no? This is disturbing when you yourself don't believe in anything. And about the only things I believe in are fast cars, faster planes, and even faster women. Okay, I don't really need the cars. Oh, there is one thing I need. My bird. Peregrine falcon I named Chaser. Amazing animal. Nature's perfect pilot and perfect killer. He can dive at more than 250 miles an hour and take a pigeon right out of the air. I learned how to be a falconer while I was in jolly old England. When I signed on with Rainmaker, I had a number of demands, naturally. But top of the list was that Chaser had to come with me. So if you're looking for an emotional commitment, you just found it, no? As for the rest, forget your cause. It does not matter to me. Whatever you're fighting for is fine by me. Just give me fuel, cash, and ordnance, and I'll solve your problem. My only rule? I don't kill innocents, on purpose. But if they happen to be in the way, well, that is war, no? I've been called self-centered, egotistical. Show me a pilot who isn't, and I'll show you a corpse. No. The real issue is that people are jealous of those who excel. The elite. The little people are resentful that they can't be like me. And at 35,000 feet, everyone below is nothing but little people, no? Unlike them, I look at myself and I like what I see. I like who I am. I like what I do. It is their problem if they can't handle it. My mother asks me sometimes if I'm afraid of dying. Not really. I can't imagine it. Never happened to me, so how can I know? But my opponents, they are afraid. And that is what gives me an edge. The edge. I've always had it. Growing up in Barcelona, I quickly learned that if you couldn't impress the boys with your strength, you could impress the girls with your charm. My sister didn't much like that I was dating all her friends behind her back, but they were already there, in my house. How much work must I do? My father was a salesman. He lived a simple, quiet life. No ambition other than to come home and watch football. So I guess he was a success, no? Since that is what he did until the day he died. Me? I left home at 18 and traveled Europe before settling in the UK, where I went to university. Then pilot training, and then a stint with Royal Air Force. And now here I am. I've tried to retain all that I've learned, but Spain seems so far away now. Once I've earned my fame and fortune, I'll head back home. The way things are going, that shouldn't be long.
You can think whatever you want to think about me, but you're only going to know what I want you to know, and that is this. I am the best mercenary pilot in the skies. Period. I take the missions I want to take. I ignore all others. Cross me in any way, and I will destroy you. Because with me, everything is personal. I am a fighter pilot. I am paid to bomb targets and shoot down planes, that's it. My deal is simple. Your mission, my way. You can hire me to accomplish a task, but how it gets done is entirely up to me, or we have a problem. Oh, and P.S., I work alone. My name? Call me Zeal. I wasn't given this name by another. I earned it in the cockpit of a fighter jet doing what I love. There isn't anybody who wouldn't love my job. There's just the 99.9% of the population who don't have the guts or skill to do it. I'd tell you that I don't have an agenda, but I won't, because that would be a lie. And I don't lie. Doesn't mean I always tell the truth. So I'm not just going to tell you what's what, you've got to figure it out. Well, that is if you can. See, I don't need anything, and I don't want anything that I can't obtain. Desire and overreach leads to mistakes, and in aerial combat, your first mistake can be your last. So, I keep my focus on where I am, not where I want to be. No needs, no wants. I live like a monk, away from distraction, and away from the complications of emotions and entanglements of family and friends that burden my foes. Well, at least that is what I'd like to believe. I remember when I was a kid, I was watching an old movie. Actually, it wasn't old, it was a timeless classic. It's about this British soldier fighting in the desert. He's a warrior, but he's isolated. Outside his comfort zone, a stranger in a strange land. He actually begins to like the Arabs who were supposed to be his enemy. Anyway, there's this moment when this hero, he's wandering. He's in some kind of trouble, and he's confronted by a fellow Brit. He asks him, "Who are you?" The warrior doesn't answer, because he doesn't know how. Because he doesn't know anymore. Somewhere along the way, after the blood and the bullets and bodies, the warrior, well, he lost himself. Became somebody else. Became something else. I think about the movie sometimes when I reflect on how I came to be. Stuff like this doesn't happen overnight. Change takes time. But as slow as that switch moves, eventually it goes from off to on, from black to white. And that moment can happen in an instant, faster than the blink of an eye. And the more dramatic the change, the more violent the event that accompanies it. That's how it happened to me. Not baptism by fire, but the rebirth because of it. I turned tragedy into opportunity, and set about being the best fighter pilot to ever strap on a jet. I succeeded because failure was inconceivable. Now I am feared by all who have chosen to pursue my line of work. But there's one pilot who might eventually become as good, perhaps better than I am. If that day should come, I will embrace it. The pilot's name is Arrow. Cole Bowman. He's had a rough time of it, but there's no denying his skills. I think that his father's talent has rubbed off on him. I also think he resents being trapped in the shadow of the old man. Not everyone can handle that. Right now, Arrow is young, cocky, prone to making mistakes. I've even jumped into a couple of his fights and saved him. No, not saved. Spared him. Not out of pity or some sense of honor, mind you. I have my reasons. For now, let's just say that I hate to see so much talent and promise go unfulfilled. I've seen it wasted before. I try not to reflect too much on the past, and like I said, I live in the moment. Still, every year that passes, I feel myself slipping a little. In my world, a millisecond can be an eternity, so you've got to make up for that loss with experience. But eventually, experience isn't enough to counter the effects of time. You lose your edge. Then you either get out of the life, or you lose your life. Pretty straightforward deal, actually. There are no old fighter pilots. There are only old ex-fighter pilots. Right now, I'm on top of that curve between physical and mental skills and experience. But with every passing year, with each passing sortie, I feel that breath on my neck. I wish I had someone I could share these feelings with, but that would also come with all the baggage I simply refuse to accept. I can never allow myself to fall in love. Not again. Nothing distracts your focus more than falling in love. It isn't only in the air that it can get you killed, but I can't let my feelings come into my work. I don't want to feel what they feel. I don't want to contemplate the tears and sorrow. Some shrink would probably have a field day with that one. But then I guess I'd be enough of a case study to keep them busy for years. Secret identity, secret base, motivations that I keep to myself, loner. Pretty profile, huh? Now, about these motivations. I'm an artist. I pick the clients I'm willing to work for. That means I make a lot of enemies out of potential clients. So be it. Without enemies, what would I be in the cockpit? A tourist? Okay, so I know that you may think by now I'm all bravado, And you may ask yourself, what is Major Zeal afraid of? Stock answers. Losing my edge, becoming too human, becoming too dependent. The real answer is probably having someone else define me before I can define myself. See, I'm what some people call a cipher. My landlord knows me by one name. Governments know me by another, clients by a third. I have passports from different countries with different names and faces. I could convince you I'm from Britain, Canada, Australia, New Zealand, America, even Germany, Russia. Each of those identities has a car, an apartment, a bank account, and a solitary life. One of the benefits or curses of my well-paid existence. But in the air, everyone knows my name. And it's my name, not one given to me by fate, or birth, or society, or family, or tradition. No, my choice, my name. I am Major Zeal.